tongue of the learned, that I may know what I ought to say. And if there be any word good for the use of edifying, give it, that thou mayest minister grace unto the hearers. Grant that I may speak boldly. Open my mouth wide, O Lord. Do thou fill it. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Some years ago, back before Ellie was even around, Becca and I decided to take the girls to go see their godfather in New Mexico. I was driving in the dead of night. I find this much easier than driving when the kids are awake and asking me how long it is until we get there, or I'm hungry, or whatever. It's just easier if they're asleep. So we finally get out of Texas, and we're cutting up north to Santa Fe. And we're really in the middle of nowhere by this point. And when I hear the call of nature, and it really wasn't much of a call so much as it was an insistent cry of desperation. And since it's the middle of the night, and we're in the middle of the nowhere, and it's still about an hour to the next gas station, I pull over to the side of the road. I get out of the car, and immediately I was struck with the beauty of my chosen spot. In the middle of nowhere, there is an understandable lack of man-made light. It was a full moon, and we had already gotten into the mountains, and in the moment, I felt extremely small. I actually reflect on this a lot as I step out of the house at night sometimes. I try to recreate that picture in my mind, and the only thing I can come up with is it's like the opposite of all the pictures you see of the lunar pictures of Earth, standing there on the surface of the moon with just nothing in the world between you and the world, and the stars, and they're just beautiful. So this is my kind of picture of the world at the moment. It was extremely flat at that point, but very high up, and the moon was right there, seeming so close it seems as though I could touch it, and just stars exploding everywhere. It was the most awe-inspiring bathroom break I've ever taken. It wasn't until I got back in the car and got out of the car and killed the headlights that I noticed how beautiful it was. The sky, the brightness the sky produces in the midst of what should be the darkest part of the night. And as I was reflecting on this, as I was preparing my sermon, I just couldn't help but pause and reflect on that. And being in the midst of a time before all the electric light we now produce, I can totally understand stargazing cultures. Why would you not? Gazing at the beauty of the vastness of nature, one can easily come to the conclusion of a higher power, because it's easy to feel small, easy to feel like there must be someone bigger than you who is in control of all of this. Now imagine if in the middle of the night, one night, you're out and feeling small, and all of a sudden a light shines brighter than all the others, and just stay that way. It's understandable that a culture committed to discerning the meaning of the heavens would seek to investigate this new brightness. And actually, here's where an analysis of the gospel starts to get interesting. The idea of astrology was especially strong in Babylon and Persia. These were also two nations who controlled the nation of Israel, one placing them in exile and the other releasing them from it, but maintaining Israel's status as a vassal nation. Both of which were instruments in the acting out of God's plans, one being the instrument of chastisement to punish them for their sins, and the other being the instrument of release and restoration. But now when the star represents from these nations are brought, but now in the star representatives from these nations are brought to Israel to find their ultimate release from sin in the child of Jesus Christ. And I find it interesting that in all the gospel accounts with the birth narrative of Jesus, all three, Matthew, Luke, and John, all mention a light. In Matthew, we get the star that draws the Magi to Jesus. In Luke, we get Simeon, who at the circumcision of Jesus takes the child into his arms and proclaims him to be a light to enlighten the Gentiles. And in John, we get, in him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Three instances, all in association with the coming of Jesus into the world. All three proclaiming the goodness to the Gentiles. The Gentiles are everyone who is not a Jew. So this isn't to say that the light was not also a light to the Jews, but the Jews already had Jesus in their midst. The light didn't necessarily need to function as a beacon to them because they were already expecting the coming Messiah. The Magi came to Israel, and Israel showed them the way to Jesus. The only problem for Israel was that when light is present, it's hard to see the heavenly light. And so they didn't recognize this child for what he was. But actually, that in itself functions as a lesson for us as well. When we're in the midst of darkness, it's easy to see the beacon that leads us out. Once a person hits rock bottom, the light to lead them to salvation is the only light shining. The problem they have is patching themselves up to be able to follow the light. But for those of us who have not yet reached that low place, there's plenty of light to distract us from the true light of Christ. Ironically, it is we who can see everything who must grope around in search of the light of Christ. We who can see who must discern between the light that distracts and the light that saves. As John says, this is the life of the light of men. Or to put it another way, the light is the life of men, of all men, both Christian and non-Christian, saint and sinner. All are called to the light of Christ, the light that lightens the world. And once we see the beauty of that true light, we learn that darkness is not dark at all, but rather an opportunity to see the greater light. Just like the Magi, the Babylonians and Persians who once were used to enslave Israel and to teach them a lesson, but were then called to Christ. And just like me, on the side of the road, in the middle of nowhere, New Mexico, humbled by the beauty of God. In the name of the Father, and the Son,